The space station called Keva-7 floated in the darkness like a metal flower. It circled a giant planet made of gas and storms. 12 different alien species lived there together. They had lived in peace for 900 years. They thought they knew everything about the universe. They thought they were safe. Park Do-han was the only human on the station. He had arrived 18 months ago from a small planet called Earth. Humans were new to space travel. They had only learned to move faster than light 30 years before. To the other species, humans were like babies trying to walk. Cute, perhaps, but not important. Do-han was 34 years old. He had dark hair cut short and hands rough from years of hard work. Back on Earth, he had been an engineer. He built buildings that could survive earthquakes and floods and hurricanes. He built things meant to last when everything else fell apart. The aliens gave him a small living space at the edge of the station. It was a round room with thin walls, meant for visitors who would not stay long. The message was clear. Humans were guests here. They were not family. Do-han accepted the small room without complaint. But he did not leave it the way he found it. From his first week on the station, he began to change things. He ordered sheets of strong metal and welded them to his walls. He added a second layer, then a third. He installed his own power generator, separate from the station systems. He built machines that could clean water and recycle air without any help from outside. The other species watched him with amusement. The Velith were tall and thin with blue skin. They were the station's engineers, proud of their ancient knowledge. Their leader, a male named Devon, liked to show recordings of the humans' work during council meetings. "Look at him," Devon said one day, pointing at a screen that showed Do-han welding metal plates to his ceiling. "He acts like the station will fall apart around him. Someone should tell him our shields have protected us for 900 years. The council chamber filled with laughter. 53 representatives from 12 species, all agreeing that the human was strange and foolish. The Brody was short and wide, with 4 arms each. They were traders and merchants, always looking for profit. A female named Myra spoke next, her 4 hands waving in the air. He ordered 17 shipments of metal this month alone. 17. Does he plan to turn his little room into a fortress? More laughter. Perhaps he is afraid of the dark, someone joked. Perhaps he thinks the vacuum of space will leak through our walls. Another added. Only one being in the chamber did not laugh. Elder San was a Namari, one of the oldest creatures on the station. The Namari had bodies made of living crystal. They could feel changes in the universe that other species could not detect. They read the weather of space itself. San was 300 years old. The elder had seen many things in that long life. And lately, San had noticed something strange about the human. He asks questions, San said quietly. He studies our sensor data. He wants to know about the outer reach. The outer reach was the edge of the galaxy, far from any inhabited world. There was nothing there but empty space and ancient darkness. All humans ask questions, Devon said, waving a thin blue hand. It is the only thing they are good at. They are too young to have real knowledge, so they bother those of us who do. The council moved on to other business. Trade agreements and resource sharing and the small politics of station life. No one thought about the human again, but in his small fortress at the station's edge, Do-han worked through the night. He had been watching the Namari sensor arrays for 11 months. He had copied their data without permission, studied their readings, looked for patterns that the ancient species had missed. And he had found something that made his blood run cold. Far away, at the galaxy's edge, something was moving. The sensor showed it as a disturbance, a ripple in the fabric of space itself. The Namari had classified it as a minor anomaly. They had filed a report and forgotten about it. Do-han had not forgotten. On Earth, he had learned that nature was patient. Disasters did not announce themselves with warnings and sirens. They built slowly, quietly, until suddenly they were everywhere at once. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. The planet had tried to kill humanity many times. And humanity had survived only because some people refused to believe they were safe. Duhan was one of those people. He had never felt safe in his life. And now, looking at the data from the outer reach, he felt less safe than ever. He pulled up historical records from the station's archives. He searched for anything about the outer reach, about disturbances in space, about unexplained events in the galaxy's past. Most species kept careful histories. Surely someone had seen something like this before. What he found made him work faster. Velith had myths about a time of darkness. Stories passed down for thousands of years about a period when all the lights in the sky went out. They called it the Long Night, and they said it was just a legend. A story to scare children. The Brody had trading records that went back 5,000 years. But before that, there was a gap. Several centuries where no records existed at all. No one knew why. The Numari had the oldest memories of all stored in their crystal bodies. And in the deepest, oldest memories, there were readings of nothing, complete darkness. As if someone had turned off every star in the sky. No one had connected these things before. Why would they? The Velith myths were just stories. The Brody Gap was just lost records. The Numari darkness was just an error in ancient data. Each species looked at their own history and saw nothing strange. Doan looked at all of it together and saw a pattern. Something happened to the galaxy on a regular cycle. Something that came from the outer reach. Something that brought darkness and death. And according to his calculations, it was coming again soon. He stopped sleeping. He worked 20 hours a day, adding more layers to his walls, digging tunnels beneath his shelter, stockpiling food and water and medicine. The other species watched and laughed. The human has gone completely mad, Myra announced at the next council meeting. He is digging holes under the station. He has stored enough food to last 20 years. He should be stopped, Nevin agreed. He is wasting resources and damaging station property. But no one actually stopped him. He was just one human, after all. One strange little creature from a young planet, building walls against an enemy that did not exist. Let him play with his toys. Let him hide in his hole. It did not matter. The stars continued to shine. The station continued to float. The 12 species continued their comfortable lives. And far away, at the edge of the galaxy, the disturbance continued to grow. It moved through space like a wave through water, growing larger and faster with each passing day. It had no name and no form. It was simply an absence, a darkness. A silence it had come before, 11,000 years ago, and 11,000 years before that, and 11,000 years before that, stretching back to the beginning of time. Each time it came, it swept through the galaxy like a wind through leaves. And when it passed, the lights went out. Dalhan could feel it coming, even though he could not explain how. He worked faster, welded harder, built stronger. The laughter of the other species did not bother him anymore. They would understand soon enough. 3 months passed on Keva 7. The station continued its slow dance around the giant planet. Life went on as it always had. And Park Dohan's shelter grew stranger every day. His small living space had disappeared completely. In its place stood something that looked like a metal tumor growing from the station's skin. Layer after layer of reinforced walls, each one thicker than the last. He had built his own power system using parts he bought, borrowed, and sometimes stole, deep under the station floor. He had dug tunnels lined with materials strong enough to survive at the center of a planet. The other species did not know whether to laugh or worry. He has requested food from our emergency supplies. Mira told the council, her forearms crossed in anger. He wants to buy rations that are meant for disasters. He says he will pay any price we ask. Deny him, Devon said. The Velith engineer was tired of talking about the human. He wastes our time and our resources. Let him eat his own strange human food. He has been eating emergency ration bars for 6 months, someone pointed out. Nothing else. Just those bars and water. The council members looked at each other. Even they had to admit that was odd. The station had excellent food from a dozen different worlds. Why would anyone choose to eat emergency rations? He's preparing for something, Elder San said quietly. Preparing for what? Devon demanded. We are at peace. We have been at peace for 900 years. What could possibly threaten us here? San's crystal body flickered with inner light. I do not know. But the human knows something. He has been studying our deep space sensors. He asks questions about the outer reach that even my people cannot answer. He's afraid of something real. He's afraid of shadows, Devon snapped. Humans are a fearful species. They come from a violent world where everything tries to kill them. They see danger everywhere because that is all they know. The council agreed. The human was paranoid. The human was strange. The human was not worth their attention, but Dohan had found an ally. Her name was Kim Yuna. She was also human, a scientist who studied alien life forms. A research ship visited Keva 7 every few months to resupply. She was 28 years old, with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She asked too many questions, which meant she had been assigned to the most distant and lonely postings. Earth could find Dot. She found Doan in his shelter one evening, welding yet another beam to his ceiling. Everyone says you have gone crazy, she said. Leaning against the doorframe, Dohan did not look up from his work. Everyone is wrong. They say you are building a bunker to survive the end of the world. They are right about that part. Yuna watched him work for a long moment. The welding torch threw blue light across his tired face. He had dark circles under his eyes and grease stains on his clothes. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. What do you know? She asked quietly. Now, Doan stopped. He turned off the torch and faced her. His eyes were serious in a way that made her uncomfortable. Something is coming, he said. Something that has come before, a long time ago. Something that kills everything in its path. And no one believes me because no one wants to believe. He showed her the data. The Namari sensor readings from the outer reach. The gaps in Brody trading records. The Velith myths about the long night. The ancient Namari memories of complete darkness. He had connected all of it into a single picture, and that picture was terrifying. Every 11,000 years, he explained, something sweeps through the galaxy. We do not know what it is. We do not know where it comes from. We only know what it leaves behind. Nothing. Silence. Death. Yuna stared at the data flowing across his screens. Her scientific mind wanted to reject it. This was too big. Too impossible. Things like this did not happen, but the numbers did not lie. How long do we have? She asked. Maybe 50 days. Maybe less. And you have told the council? 17 times. Dohan's voice was flat. They marked my messages as spam after the 5th one. They think I am a crazy human who is afraid of the dark. Yuna was quiet for a long time. Then she straightened her shoulders and looked him in the eye. What do you need? From that day forward, Yuna became Dohan's secret partner. She used her position as a scientist to access restricted archives. She asked careful questions of the Namari elders, pretending to be curious rather than concerned. She diverted supplies to Dohan's shelter and helped him build faster. The picture they assembled together was worse than Dohan had feared. The ancient Namari memories showed what happened when the darkness came. It was not an explosion or a fire or any kind of attack they could understand. It was simply an ending. One moment, everything was alive. The next moment, nothing was. Hearts stopped beating. Minds stopped thinking. Even machines stopped working, their power drained away to nothing. The darkness did not kill. It simply turned everything off. How do we survive something like that? Yuna asked one night. They were sitting in Dohan's shelter, surrounded by walls thick enough to survive a nuclear blast. I do not know if we can, Dohan admitted. But I know that these walls block radiation. They block electromagnetic pulses. They block almost every kind of energy we know about. Maybe they will block this too. That is not very scientific. No, it is not. He looked around at the shelter he had built with his own hands. On Earth, we have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I have prepared the best I can. Now all I can do is hope. Yuna thought about the thousands of people on the station. The Velith with their proud knowledge. The Brody with their busy trades. The Namari with their ancient wisdom. All of them going about their lives, completely unaware of what was coming. We have to warn them again, she said. They will not listen. We have to try. So they tried. Yuna used her position as a scientist to request an emergency council meeting. She presented the data they had collected. She showed them the patterns in the ancient records. She explained what the darkness was and when it would arrive. The council listened politely. Then they laughed. A human scientist and a human engineer tell us the galaxy is about to end, Devon said, his thin face twisted with amusement. How convenient that only humans can see this great threat. How convenient that only humans are preparing for it. This is not about humans, Yuna said, fighting to keep her voice calm. This is about all of us. 12,000 people live on this station. They will all die if we do not prepare. We have survived for 900 years without human help, Myra said. We will survive 900 more. Take your fear stories back to your little shelter and leave us in peace. The council dismissed them without another word. Yuna was furious. Dawn was calm. We did what we could, he said as they walked back to the shelter. Now we prepare for those who will listen. No one will listen. Some will. When the time comes, some will see the truth. We have to be ready for them. He opened the shelter door and began welding again. Yuna watched him for a moment, then picked up a welding torch of her own. If the galaxy would not save itself, they would save whoever they could. Dohan was alone in his shelter when he saw the first star die. It was late at night by station time. Most of the 12,000 people on Keva 7 were sleeping. Dohan was watching his sensors, as he did every night, tracking the disturbance from the outer reach. He had not slept properly in weeks. His eyes burned, and his hands shook from too much coffee and too little rest. Then his screen flickered. A star 300 light years away simply stopped shining. It did not explode. It did not fade. One moment it was there, burning bright as it had for billions of years. The next moment it was gone. Dohan's heart began to pound. He checked his sensors, hoping for an error. But there was no error. Another star winked out. Then another. Then 5 more at once. A wave of darkness was rushing toward them, faster than anything should be able to move. His hands moved before his mind could catch up. He grabbed the emergency broadcast switch and overrode every protocol the station had. His voice echoed through every corridor, every living space, every ship docked at Keva 7. This is Park Dohan. The silence is here. You have less than 6 hours. Anyone who wants to survive, come to my shelter. I can fit 37 people. Bring nothing but yourselves and any water you can carry. This is not a drill. This is not a joke. 6 hours. He repeated the message 3 times. Then he opened his shelter door and waited for the first hour. No one came. The station's communication channels exploded with confusion and anger. Devon broadcast a message calling Dohon a madman who should be arrested. Mira demanded that security forces shut down his transmitter. The council held an emergency meeting to discuss how to punish him for causing panic. No. One looked at the stars. Dohan stood in his doorway and watched the darkness grow. It was visible now with the naked eye. A section of the sky that should have been filled with light was completely black, empty, dead. The first person to arrive was Elder San. The ancient Numari came alone, crystal body glowing with inner light. San had felt the disturbance before anyone else. The elder species could read the weather of space, and right now that weather was screaming. "You were right," San said simply. "I should have listened sooner. You are here now. That is what matters." 4 more Numari arrived behind their elder. They were younger, frightened, their crystal bodies pulsing with nervous energy. San had convinced them to come. San had made them believe. The Numari began spreading the word through their own channels. They were trusted. They were ancient. They did not lie. And when the Numari started telling people to run, people listened. Yuna arrived next with 6 other humans from docked ships. They carried water containers and emergency medical supplies. Their faces were pale with fear, but their hands were steady. "How long?" Yuna asked. 4 hours. Maybe less. A group of Brody merchants came running down the corridor. Mira was among them. Her forearms were full of water bottles and ration packs. "Do not say anything," she snapped at Dahan as she pushed past him into the shelter. "Do not say you warned us. Do not say anything at all." Dahan said nothing. More people came. Velith engineers who had finally looked up at the sky and seen the darkness. Scientists from research vessels. Maintenance workers who had heard the Numari warnings. They crowded into Dahan's shelter, packing themselves into corridors and tunnels he had dug over months of hard work. By the time the darkness reached Kela 7, 31 beings had found their way inside. Dahan sealed the door. The last thing he saw before it closed was the giant planet Moral hanging in the sky. It had been there for 900 years, a swirl of orange and brown storms. The station's entire existence had been built around that planet. Then the darkness touched it, and Moral vanished. Inside the shelter, people screamed. Even Doan felt his heart stop for a moment. A planet the size of 1,000 Earths had simply disappeared. Erased from existence like a drawing wiped from a board. The station's power failed next. Every light went dark. Every life support system stopped humming. Every shield generator that had protected Keva 7 for 900 years went silent. But inside Dahan's shelter, the lights stayed on. His independent power generator hummed steadily. His reinforced walls held firm. His air recyclers continued to breathe. Whatever force had killed the station could not reach them here. Through a small viewport in the shelter's thickest wall, they watched the galaxy die. Star by star, the lights went out. The great clouds of glowing gas that filled the sky faded to nothing. The distant points of light that had guided travelers for millions of years disappeared one by one until there was nothing left but darkness. Complete, total, absolute darkness. Some people wept. Others prayed in languages Dohan did not understand. The Numari stood in silence, their crystal bodies dark for the first time in their long lives. Even Elder San, who had seen 3 centuries of history, had no words for what was happening. "What is it?" Myra whispered. Her forearms were wrapped around herself like a child seeking comfort. "What is doing this?" Doan shook his head. He had no answer. He had only known that something was coming. He had never understood what Elder San spoke into the darkness. "In the oldest memories of my people, there is a name for this," They called it the silence, but I do not think it is really silent. Listen. They listened, and through the walls of the shelter, through all the layers of metal and shielding, they could hear something. A sound so low and deep that it was more feeling than noise. A vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like the heartbeat of something impossibly large. The galaxy is breathing, San said. That is what I think this is. Every 11,000 years, something resets. Something clears away the old to make room for the new. We are living through a breath. That is not an answer, a Velith engineer said. His voice was high and tight with fear. No, San agreed. It is not. But it is all we have. The darkness lasted for 19 hours. People slept in shifts, curled up on the floor of the shelter. Dohan did not sleep at all. He monitored his sensors, tracked the wave as it passed over them, measured everything he could. If they survived this, he wanted to understand it. He wanted to make sure no one ever faced it unprepared again. Yuna stayed beside him through the long night. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. Then, without warning, the stars came back. It happened all at once, like a light switch being flipped. One moment there was infinite darkness. The next moment the galaxy blazed with life, somehow brighter than before. Stars and nebulae in distant galaxies filled the viewport, more beautiful than anything Dohan had ever seen. Someone laughed. Someone else started crying again, but this time with relief. The Namari's crystal bodies began to glow once more, warm and steady. Elder San moved to the viewport and looked out at the reborn galaxy. It is over, the elder said. We have survived. Dohan nodded slowly. His body felt hollow. He had not realized how tense he had been until the tension finally released. Open the doors, Yuna said. We need to check on the others. Dohan unsealed the shelter. The air that rushed in from the station was cold and stale. No life support. No heat. No power at all. He stepped out into the darkness of the dead station. And for the first time, he understood what his preparation had really saved. 31 people out of 12,000. The rest were gone. The search for survivors began as soon as the shelter doors opened. Duhan led the first team into the darkness of the dead station. They wore emergency suits that Yuna had packed in the shelter weeks ago. Their flashlights cut through air that was already growing cold. The power failure had stopped everything, including the heating systems that kept the station warm in the frozen void of space. They found the first bodies in the corridor outside the shelter. 3 Velith engineers lay on the floor, their thin blue forms perfectly still. They had been running toward Dawn's shelter when the silence took them. They had almost made it. A few more minutes, a few more steps, and they would have lived. Mira made a sound like a wounded animal when she saw them. One of the dead had been her business partner for 30 years. They did not suffer, Elder San said quietly. The ancient Namari had joined the search team, crystal body providing soft light in the darkness. Look at their faces. There is no pain. They simply stopped. It was true. The dead looked peaceful. They had not struggled or gasped for breath. Their hearts had stopped beating. Their minds had stopped thinking. Whatever the silence was, it did not bring pain. It simply brought an end. They searched the entire station over the next 3 days. Every living space, every corridor, every ship that had been docked when the darkness came. The results were always the same. 12,000 beings had lived on Keva 7. 31 had survived. All of them in Dohan's shelter. The station itself was dead, but not destroyed. Its metal walls still held. Its structure remained intact. But every system had been wiped clean. Power cores drained to nothing. Computer memories erased. Even the biological machines in the science labs had been reset to their most basic states. Whatever the silence was, It did not break things. It turned them off, like someone pulling the plug on a giant machine. On the fourth day, the survivors gathered in the station's ruined council chamber. The great meeting room was dark and cold now. Emergency lights provided the only glow. The 31 survivors sat in seats meant for hundreds, looking small and lost in the vast space. A young Velith named Ursi spoke first. He had been chosen as the new representative of his species because he was the only Velith left alive. Everyone else from his race on the station had died. "How did you know?" Ursi demanded. His voice shook with anger and grief. "How did you know this would happen when our greatest scientist saw nothing?" Doan sat quietly in his seat. He had not slept since before the silence came. His eyes were red and his hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "I did not know. I suspected. There is a difference. Explain. On Earth, we have faced many disasters, earthquakes, floods, fires. Our planet has tried to kill us many times. And we have learned that the worst disasters are the ones no one expects. They are the ones that have not happened in living memory. So we stopped trusting memory. We started preparing for things that had never happened before." He looked around the room at the survivors. Namari and Velith, Brody and Human, all of them brought together by chance and disaster. I saw patterns in your old records that did not make sense. Gaps in history, myths about darkness, sensor readings from thousands of years ago that showed nothing where there should have been something. I connected them together and saw something coming. I did not know what it was. I still do not know what it is. But I knew it was real, and I knew it was dangerous. So I prepared. "You told us 17 times, Myra said. The Brody merchant's voice was hollow. "You warned us, and we laughed at you. Yes. Why did you still help us? Why did you open your door when the darkness came? You could have kept us out. You could have let us die with the others." Dohan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "On Earth, there is an old story about a man who built a boat when no one else would. People laughed at him too. They thought he was crazy. But when the flood came, he opened his door to everyone who wanted to be saved. That is what humans do. We prepare for the worst, and then we share what we have built." The chamber was silent. The survivors looked at each other, at the human who had tried to save them all and had saved only 30-1. Elder San spoke into the silence. "What happens now?" "The silence has passed. It will not come again for 11,000 years. But we have lost so much. How do we go forward?" "We rebuild," Una said. She had been sitting beside Dawn, quiet until now. "But not the way we built before. The old way assumed we were safe. The old way trusted that nothing would ever change. That was a mistake. What do you suggest?" Ursi asked. Una looked at Dawn, and he nodded slightly. They had talked about this during the long hours in the shelter, waiting for the darkness to pass. "We prepare," Dawn said. "Not just for the silence. For everything. We build shelters on every station. We create emergency systems that work independently. We assume that disaster will come, and we make sure we can survive it when it does." "That sounds like paranoia," a Velith engineer muttered. "Maybe it is. On Earth, we call it common sense." The meeting continued for hours. They argued about resources and priorities. They discussed how to contact other stations and warn them about what had happened. They made plans for survival in a station without power or life support. But through all the arguments, one thing became clear. The old way of thinking was dead. The comfortable assumption that nothing bad could happen was gone forever. The galaxy had faced its heartbeat, and the galaxy had nearly died. When the meeting finally ended, Dohon walked back to his shelter alone. It was the only place on the station with power, the only place with warmth. He sat down on the floor, surrounded by the walls he had built with his own hands, and finally allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. 12,000 people dead. 31 saved. All because one human had looked at old records and seen a pattern. He thought about the ones he could not save. The ones who had laughed at his warnings. The ones who had been running toward his shelter when the silence took them, just seconds too late. He thought about their faces, peaceful in death, and he wondered if he could have done more. The answer was no. He knew that. He had done everything he could. He had warned them. He had begged them. He had built a shelter big enough for 37 people and kept its door open until the very last moment. But knowing that did not make the guilt go away. Una found him there an hour later, sitting in the dark with his head in his hands. She did not say anything. She just sat down beside him and waited. Finally, Dohan spoke. I thought preparing would be enough. I thought if I built well enough, I could save everyone. You saved 31 people, Una said. That is 31 more than would have survived without you. It is not enough. No, it is not. She put her hand on his shoulder. But it is a start. And now we have to make sure it never happens again. Not here, not anywhere. Dohan looked up at her. His eyes were wet, but his jaw was set with determination. Then we have work to do. 1 year after the silence, the galaxy had changed. The story of HFY spread slowly at first. Faster-than-light communication had been damaged by the Great Darkness, and many systems were still recovering. But eventually, the truth reached every inhabited world. 12,000 dead, 31 survivors. A single human who had seen what was coming and tried to warn everyone. Park Dohan became famous, though he did not want to be. He stayed on HFY as the station slowly came back to life. Other ships arrived with supplies and engineers. Power was restored. Life support was rebuilt. The dead were honored with ceremonies from a dozen different cultures. But Dohan did not attend the ceremonies. He was too busy working. He had returned to his shelter, the fortress that had saved 31 lives, and begun designing something new. Better shielding, larger capacity, simpler construction methods that any species could understand and copy. He wanted to make sure that when the next disaster came, no one would be unprepared. The first visitors arrived 3 months after the silence. Velith engineers who had swallowed their pride and come to learn. Dohan welcomed them without comment. He did not remind them that they had laughed at him. He did not say he had warned them. He simply showed them his designs and explained how to build shelters of their own. More visitors followed. Brody merchants who saw profit in disaster preparation. Namari elders who wanted to combine their weather-reading abilities with human engineering. Scientists from species Dohan had never heard of, all asking the same questions. How did he know? How did he survive? How could they do the same? Dohan answered every question. He shared every design. He refused payment of any kind. I did not build my shelter to make money, he told a group of Brody traders who offered him vast sums. I built it to survive. And now I want everyone to survive. Una worked beside him through those early months. She translated his designs for species that thought differently than humans. She explained the philosophy behind his preparations, the idea that safety was not something you could trust others to provide. You had to build it yourself. Together they created something new. They called it the Human Foundation. The name caused some argument at first. Why name it after humans when so many species would be involved? But Elder San settled the debate with a single observation. Humans are the ones who prepared, the ancient Namari said. Humans are the ones who survived. Humans are the ones who opened their door when no one else would. The name is not pride. It is truth. The foundation grew faster than anyone expected. Within a year, it had offices on 100 stations. Within 5 years, It had become the standard for galactic safety. New construction projects required Foundation approval. Emergency protocols followed Foundation guidelines. The paranoid human approach to survival became the normal way of doing things. Doan oversaw it all, though he preferred working with his hands to sitting in meetings. He trained engineers from species that had looked down on humanity for decades. He designed shelters that could survive stellar explosions, complete vacuum, and electromagnetic extinction events. He wrote the manual that would guide galactic construction for thousands of years to come. But he never stopped asking questions about the silence itself. Late at night, when the station was quiet and his work was done, Dohan would sit in his original shelter and study the data he had collected. The 11,000-year cycle, the wave of darkness from the outer reach, the way everything had simply stopped. "It is too precise," he told Yuna one evening. They were looking at star charts together, tracing the path of the silence through the galaxy. Natural events do not happen on such a regular schedule. Earthquakes do not come every 11,000 years exactly. Storms do not follow a perfect cycle. This is something else. Something artificial? Maybe, or something alive. Something so old and so large that we cannot understand it. Something that was here before any of us existed. Yuna looked at the star charts. The pattern was clear when you knew how to see it. A wave spreading from the galaxy's edge, touching every star, then fading away. Will we ever know what it is? I do not know, but I intend to keep looking. He spent the rest of his life looking. He trained others to look after him. The Foundation created a special division dedicated to studying the silence, gathering every piece of evidence, building better sensors to watch the outer reach. They never found the answer, but they never stopped trying. Dohan died at 97 years old. He passed quietly in his sleep, surrounded by colleagues from a dozen species who had become his friends over the decades. His body was cremated according to human tradition, and his ashes were scattered among the stars. But his shelter remained. The Keva 7 station kept Dohan's original fortress exactly as it had been during the silence. The thick walls, the independent power system, the tunnels he had dug by hand. It became a museum, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to understand what one human had done. The inscription at the entrance was simple. Yuna had written it herself after Dohan refused to write anything. He prepared when others laughed. He opened his door when others fled. He taught us that survival is not given. It is built. Visitors read those words and walked through the narrow corridors where 31 beings had huddled, while the stars went dark. They touched the walls that had saved them. They saw the welding marks left by human hands, and they understood. The galaxy had changed because of one man. Not a warrior or a king. Not a great leader or a brilliant scientist. Just an engineer from a small planet who had refused to believe he was safe. 10,000 years passed. The Foundation grew and evolved. New shelters were built on every inhabited world. New protocols were written for disasters that had never happened but might someday come. The galaxy learned to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And far away, at the edge of the galaxy, the silence waited. It had no thoughts, no feelings, no awareness as beings understood such things. It was simply a force, a pulse, a breath in the life of something too vast to comprehend. It had come before, and it would come again. That was its nature. That was its purpose. But when it came again, it would find something different. Not comfortable species who assumed they were safe. Not proud civilizations who had forgotten how to be afraid. Instead, it would find shelters, preparations, billions of beings who had learned the lesson of KEVA-7. Survival is not given. It is built. And the galaxy had built well. The human way, born from a world of earthquakes and floods and endless disasters, had become the galactic way. The paranoia of one species had become the wisdom of all. And when the darkness came again in 11,000 years, there would be lights waiting to shine through it. Park. Dohan's legacy was complete. The galaxy was ready.